Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Dental Unfiltered. I'm Matt Brown. I'm here with our normal co host, Dr. Andrew Vallo. And today we have a really special guest on the show. Me and Andrew spent time around Zach in person, and we interact with Zach quite a bit. Zach Shelley's on the show today as our guest. Zach's really unique. He came from outside of dental into dental, kind of like I did. He was previously, of all things, a professional skateboarder. And Zach has built an awesome Facebook group, and he's really big with ADOM. If you're an office manager and you're listening to this, or you're a doc and you're listening to this, one of the best investments you can make in yourself or in your office manager is getting them involved in ADOM. And Zach teaches an awesome course called Follow the Leader. And Zach has become very popular and been very effective in a space where if we profiled the classic office manager, it's 40 to 50-year-old woman, or maybe over 50, who's been in the dental space her whole career, who started out as a DA, then went to the front desk, then went to the back again as a manager, and the path's very similar, where Zach's is all very unique. So it's really exciting to have Zach on, and he's probably one of the most popular male office managers right now in the entire space. He's got a big voice. If you're in dental and you're looking through your phone, you can't not scroll through and not see his face right now. It's pretty crazy. So, Zach, tell us a little bit about your Facebook group and kind of like what's it like to be in your position and being so popular with ADOM in this community now. And then we'll get into your course and that kind of stuff. But just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first off, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Andrew, for having me on the show. Super excited to be on here and just talk dentistry and a little bit about my story and why I love what I do. First is my Facebook group is Dental Office Manager Success Network. So go ahead and take a look on that and request to join. And I'd love to have you guys in the group. I'm trying to take a stab at dentistry a little bit different than everybody else. And I think having a career outside of dentistry in skateboarding, there's a lot that you have to kind of sell yourself and get visibility and be able to network with people. And I feel like that part of my career has really kind of set me up for success coming into dentistry and being able to have these conversations with people, network and get visibility. Being in office management, I started as a dental technician before I got into dental practice management. And that is a very male dominated space. So when I transitioned into the practice manager here about 4 years ago, I just for fun, I love looking up statistics. I love looking at numbers, and 1% of all office managers in the nation are male. So, got 99% of these office managers are women. And one of the conversations we kind of had with the owner was like, we wanted to be able to travel, and be able to do things together easily, whereas you got to bring bigger groups. It's harder to kind of individualize when you have a female office manager and you have a male owner. The dynamic in our office is so much different than most dental practices because I'm able to have just kind of a little bit different direction. I feel that I'm able to approach situations without so much emotion and more strategy. And the team actually really enjoys that.
Awesome. So, when you were coming into dentistry, like when did you realize like I want to do a Facebook group and I want to become more of like, what was the moment you're like, I want to become more of an influencer? Like I want to change the course of stuff and change the way people think. Like when did you decide I want to take on that mission?
So I was pushed in that mission a little bit from Adam Smith from Dental Intelligence. And I tell him all the time, I'm giving,
of course, Adam,
Adam's a great guy. He's like, you should start a Facebook group and like, you should do this. And I was like, I don't know, man, I don't got the time for it. That's not really what I'm wanting to do. And he goes, I want you to think about it seriously for like 24 hours. He's like, and he just kept pushing me. And so I did give it a serious thought, obviously, because I have the group now. And Adam didn't let up. And I'm really thankful that he didn't, to have a friend like that that's looking and saying, hey, you have something special. But what he did is he told me, he goes, when we had you on our podcast, he goes, I knew from the moment you started talking, he's like, you have so much value to give to people. And so when he said that, I was like,
I agree with that.
Where is that coming from? So then I was like, well, when I came into the practice, Dr. Calderon was like, I want you to be a part of ADOM. And so he joined ADOM, and I was like, hey, I'd love to do my fellowship. I think it'd be something really good for me to further my career. He's like, do it. And I was like, all right. And I was like, do you want to know how much? He goes, nope, just take care of it. And I was like, well, hey man, I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to get my master's. He says, that's awesome. When you get your diplomat, I want to be there, which I'm getting that next year in Texas. And so he had that support. And then he's like, hey man, I think some organizational leadership programs would be really good. Look into some programs and see what you can find. And I don't know if it was destiny or what, but the only program that I could find was through Harvard Business School. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to be easy. And so I told him, I said, hey, Harvard's got a program. Do you want me to do it? And he goes, 100%. I was like, it's going to be this. He goes, I don't care. So he sent me to Harvard to do organizational leadership. He sent me to UF to do my AFDA and radiology. And so I started thinking, I was like, this is where that value is coming from. My owner here and my boss believes enough in me that I can do and shoot for the stars. And he told me, he goes, I want you to be the best office manager in this country. And he goes, and I'm going to give you every ability to do that. And when I thought about it, I was like, man, how many office managers don't have this? So I'm trying to bridge that gap. None. Zero.
None.
Zero.
The answer is none.
So my mindset is, how do I bridge this gap of office managers that don't have support? I'm not saying I'm going to send everybody to Harvard and UF and I'm going to do all these fun things, but what is the value that I've gotten that I can now bridge that gap and say, this is what you need to do. Put me on the phone with your doctor and I'll explain to them why this is important, how we're going to make you more money. And so that's kind of where that passion started coming from. And when Adam asked those questions, I kind of started thinking back. I'm like, man, I've been really blessed to have all this. Like, how can I do that now for everybody in my group? So that's where I'm trying to give as much value as I possibly can.
Thinking about like dentists and like scarcity mindset, right? So like I can think of a few dentists that I work with, most of them, where if I was on the call with them, I was like, hey man, you should send your doc to ADOM. Send your office manager to ADOM, right? The first thing they're going to say, I'd love to hear Andrew's opinion on this. I can think of one doc in particular. The first thing they're going to say is, but if I do all that and they leave, it's a waste. And I'm like, if you do all that and you invest in them, they're not going to want to leave.
Well, I think the other question is, what if you don't do all that and they stay? So like that's the counter argument there is what if you don't invest in your team and they stay and they never grow? So I mean, honestly, that's incredible, Zach. And I didn't know all of that, from our times that we've spoken in the past, but that's incredible that, that Jonathan was able to give you all of that opportunity there. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty abundant-minded dentist. And at the same time, I don't know if I would just a drop of a hat. I don't care what it costs, go do this stuff. So, I mean, that just really goes to show, how much he believed in you, that he was whatever it takes, go do it, go be the best office manager. And I love that mindset. Matt's totally right. I mean, unfortunately, there is a scarcity mindset among dentists. And that's been one of the big things that we've been trying to battle with our podcast is to show dentists like what potential is truly out there if you have the right mindset. So, we focused a lot on investing in marketing and investing in, technology that can turn ROI. And we've definitely talked about investing in your team, but honestly, probably not extensively. And so this is a really cool newer topic for us, I think today is like what can happen when you truly do invest in your team. So,
well, yeah, it's one of those things too. Like you do have to have that trust. You have to have that relationship. You got to know the person and their drive. And Jonathan knew with me coming in, like I wanted to do more. Like my first day on the job, I have this long Google Doc of like all the things he wants me to kind of start tackling. And he told me, honestly, I think in your first like 2 weeks, he's like, I thought you were just going to sit in your office and twiddle your fingers because you just walked into a practice that's never had an office manager. I don't know what your job's going to look like. And he's like, you just got up and started telling people what to do. And he goes, that's the moment I knew. He's like, this guy's got something. I walked into an office with a staff of almost 30 people and, 4 doctors and, just ready to rock and roll. But that's my style. So once again, not everybody's going to approach things as hard and fast as like I do. A lot of my buddies that are outside of dentistry, they're like, so what school are you in now? Like they always make jokes because, every year it's some new program, some new thing. But I'm like, our industry is constantly evolving. And as leaders, we need to make sure that we have everything in our tool belt that we can attack any problem or actually even just have a different viewpoint on it. Because it's not like you may agree with me, Andrew, on this one is you could take a perio course from like Travis Campbell, and then you could go take a perio course from somebody else, and they might teach it a little bit differently, and you're going to get something more out of one course than the other. So it's it's not that one sole management course or one sole organization is going to teach you everything you need to know. So when you're multifaceted in that and also taking courses outside of dentistry and business, then it's like you're getting a well-rounded a viewpoint on everything. So. And then the last point is like, it's just like associateships. When you say the scarcity mindset with dentists, it's like, man, push your associates to be the best they possibly can because they're going to, if you support them and you want them to be as busy as they possibly can. And that's what we experience here. It's the same thing with your office manager. You're supporting them. They're going to stay because they feel supported, they feel heard, and they have everything they need.
Yeah, and I think with associates, a lot of docs, whether it's intentional or unintentional, like they end up hiring or wanting to hire dentists that have less experience than they do. You know, maybe they're not as well rounded in their skill set, and I think the mindset comes from, you know, they still want to kind of be the head honcho there. They want to feel like they're the lead dentist of their own practice. Maybe they want to keep the specialty procedures for themselves and have I think there's a lot of docs out there that think like, oh, I'm going to hire my first associate and they're going to just do all the fillings and bread and butter dentistry. And I'm going to do all of the, you know, big sedation cases and implants and, you know, smile makeovers and whatnot. I took the opposite approach. So, you know, I tried to intentionally try to hire associates that had broader, wider skill sets than I did. And thank God I did that, because at this point in time, I have now essentially transitioned out of the chair. So good thing that I looked for docs that were really well-rounded, because now they can provide all these skill sets, you know, that I wasn't able to provide our patients. So,
yeah, absolutely. And also you end up learning so much from them also.
Oh yeah.
Who are we to say we're God's gift to dentistry and we're the best? Like if we're not trying to learn from others, like you're at this, you're at a plateau. And really the only way is to go down with that mindset. There's no further up, because you're just stuck there.
So going back a little bit, Zach, earlier you said like our industry is ever evolving, right?
Yeah.
And at my company, I deal with office managers a lot. And the way we approach things is very different than how they approach things early in their career, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll hear from an office manager, well, I've been doing this 20 years and I've never done it this way before, right? Or like, I've never heard of doing it this way. And you know, when you hear like statements like that, right, where it's like, you know, the new approach is scary, like, and there's apprehension to the new approach, whatever it may be, hygiene recall, scheduling, it could be anything in the practice, right? Mm-hmm. That mindset is so rampant in our industry. What advice do you give those? Because how long have you been a manager? A couple of years, right?
In dentistry or
in dentistry.
So at this practice, 4 years, and then 11 years I managed the dental lab. So I've got 15 years of dental management total, but as practice manager, 4.
Yeah. So let's go with managing a practice, because labs and practice are very different. Right? You managed a practice for 4 years, and you started as a manager, right? Okay. So most docs hire and they go, we just had an episode about this. Oh, I want someone with lots of management experience. I don't think experience equals good. End of story. So if you were going to give advice to your peers who've been doing this for 20 years and have that mentality, what would you say to them?
So I've had this conversation a few times, and I've also had conversations with my own team on things like this, because you get team members that always kick back and are like, we've always done it this way. Yeah. And you get into the spot. Have you ever heard the ham story?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about the ham story to start off. So you know, grandma makes this ham. She cuts either end off of the ham. She puts it in the oven, cooks it. It's the best ham. Everybody loves it. So mom starts cooking the ham after grandma passes away, right? And mom cuts the ends off the ham. Or sorry, grandma's still alive. Let's keep grandma alive because it's pertinent to the story. Mom cuts the ends off the ham, puts it in the oven, cooks it. Best ham ever. The daughter, you know, so this is the grandma's granddaughter, comes up and says, Grandma, why do you cut the ends off the ham? And she goes, oh, well, I only did that because the ham wouldn't fit in my oven because it was small. And so what happens with this is it's a perception of what you're doing. You're only doing it because it's been done that way for so long.
Yep.
You're not looking outside the box because you're not asking the questions. So that's one part of it is, you know, yes, we've done it this long for 20 years, let's say 20 years, and you're getting results, but are those the best results? So my suggestion is if you have a system and you're not breaking that system and then rebuilding that system over as you break it, then you're not pushing your limits. These systems that we put in place are not meant to sit for 20 years, because dentistry 20 years ago to dentistry today is different. So that system should be pushed.
CBCTs weren't in every practice 5 years ago.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of our listeners were probably born in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe even mid 90s at this point. Which doesn't seem like that long ago, but think about what dentistry looked like in the mid 90s. I mean, we're talking film dip x-rays. We're talking paper charts. I mean, like 95% of what you're doing these days has changed in some way, probably for the better with all this technology. But like, if you're still using the same systems that this office was using back in the mid 90s, or that your office manager was using in the mid 90s, and we've got all these added, benefits of technology, chances are you can get more, juice out of the squeeze there.
So let me tell you this. I experienced this story just the other day. So Dr. Calderon, his wife said, my MacBook Pro is not working. The screen won't come on. I can hear the fans moving. So he's like, okay, I'll take it to the Apple Store, get it fixed. Mind you, this is 4 years old. Okay, 4 years old. Bring it in. He said, hey, the screen's not working. You can see a pinpoint. So probably one of the kids stabbed it with a pencil or something, right? He goes in and he said, well, this is a vintage Apple product. 4 years old. We are considering electronics vintage at 4 years already.
Crazy.
And are we wrong at this point of how fast our electronics and our technology is expanding? Like, that should be the answer right there if you're questioning change on how you do a system. Like, we're looking at things and Apple is saying this is a vintage product because it's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
Well, for a dentist listening, how many tools are in your operatory now that weren't in your operatory 4 years ago? I just did an episode with a Dr. Sasha, who's doing our clinical hour. We were talking about how augmented reality is coming into dentistry, where you wear goggles and you're going to do surgery. It's going to show you where the nerves is, where the bone is, where the sinus is to avoid these things down to perfectly. We have robots in the operatory now placing implants. That wasn't a thing 5 years ago, or it was starting to become a thing. Also, the consumer behaviors have evolved. When I first got into dentistry, some practices were making it a priority to get Google reviews. Now every practice is on the Google review trains. You have to be, right? Everything around you is evolving. If you're not, you're left behind.
So there's a post I put in my group, I think last week, and some of my posts are very simple. It's just a picture that I've edited and done stuff, and it'll just be a few words. And this one says, keep it simple. I don't know if you guys saw that one, but this is what I try to tell people. So we're talking about change, right? And you're trying to get an office manager that's, been in it for 20 years. And then we look at these things, whether somebody's like, hey, you need to do this, and this, right? Like, they have this whole list of things to do, and it's overwhelming. And that's where change is hard. So in this post, the whole point of this is we overcomplicate everything. So when we see this and we're like, oh, we got to make this change, I've got to change 30 different things. Wrong. You change one thing and start with that. Once you're comfortable getting that other change, then you add and you compound on it. And what you'll end up seeing is so much more success because you've mastered that first thing you put in place, and then you see it works. So then you're encouraged to get the other part of it to get going. And you're like, oh, crap, this is awesome. And your team isn't overwhelmed by all of the change because you've strategically implemented these changes in, and you haven't overwhelmed anybody.
If you're practicing full time and you're the owner doc, you kind of got your head down in the trenches for, months and months at a time. And then all of a sudden you go to one, weekend course, one mastermind event, whatever it is, and you get like 10 of these great new ideas. Oh my God, this is amazing. And, one of two things happens. Either you come back from this event and you get right back in the trenches and forget about everything you're planning to do. Or the other end of the coin is you come back and you're like, hey, we're going to make these 10 changes all at once in the office. And then to your point, the team is overwhelmed and none of these changes are done correctly because we're trying to do too many different things at one time. So I think that's some very sage advice is like, first of all, maybe you need to pick your head up a little more often so that you're not going so long without hearing, ideas. You need to get more involved in the dental Facebook groups. You need to listen to more dental podcasts. You need to speak with more people, that are involved, in dentistry. But, regardless, whenever you do come across great ideas, try to pick one or two great ideas and start there and perfect those before you start implementing other changes to your systems.
Yeah. And I've noticed too, so like one of our big ones, like our pedo morning huddle, like the doctor was like, I want to raise on my production that we pay for adjusted production. I was like, well, that's not going to change, but you want to make more money. I'll show you how to make more money.
Yeah.
And so she goes, okay, game on. And I made changes just in morning huddle. That's it. And she was up, I think she's up almost 20% from last year. Just one change.
What was that change?
What was that change?
How was the sausage made? We want to know this.
So the biggest thing is when you're looking at these patients, so peds is different than general dentistry, right?
Yeah.
But what wasn't happening is looking at these kids and saying, okay, they were just here, they're getting an operatory. I want you to have your assistants get in and do all the sealants and anything else that they're capable of doing before you even get in that chair. So they're going to go and start adding all these adjunct services on that the patients already need, rather than bringing them back for a subsequent opportunity to do that. And then also have my front desk, because they're trained and they have their extra certification. All the panos are coming through the front desk. It takes 10 seconds to do a pano. So she's getting all these x-rays getting done right up here. The doctor's not needed other than just a quick look once they're in the operatory. So she's not bouncing back and forth. But just those small changes, but it comes down to chart prep. It's a very simple thing, but you're looking at your chart prep, you're looking at your patients. Do they need this? Yes. Hey, doc, before you come in, I'm going to take care of the sealants. I might get 2 done, have you numb, and then you go to your other patient. When you're done, I'll be done. We can tackle this treatment. And so we started just doing little changes like that, and it made a massive increase in her production.
I had that realization about 2 years ago that we were not taking advantage of combining services or taking care of, what patients were due for at any given visit. And so I hired a virtual assistant, and one of her only jobs is literally to chart prep for all of the patients coming through and make sure that every single day, all of the correct procedure codes are attached to each, patient, especially the ones coming in for hygiene visits, but even the ones coming in for doctorate appointments, like maybe they're overdue for their next exam and x-rays. And like, if they're coming in for a filling, why not get all that stuff done in the same visit? So I just basically just adding codes so that when, and the whole team knows, like, you got to look at what codes are on the appointment, and that's what we should be 100%. Doing today. So I think that made that little turn of the knob made a huge difference for our practice as well.
Yeah, people don't realize, like you said, you nailed it on the head. We've got 11 total hygienists, and we run about 8 columns of hygiene every day. Yeah. And, just them double checking all their procedures attached to the appointment, whether they need an exam or if they've had their x-rays and if they're due for their 5-year update or 3-year update, depending on what their FMX frequency is, like just making sure those are done, you guys will see such a massive increase in your production just off that's one simple change.
We talk about small things being done consistently having major impact. So, it's exactly that. It's, hey, increasing that fluoride percentage. And, a lot of people think like, oh, fluoride's $30. Like, what difference is that going to make? But like, how many patients do you see over the course of a given year? And if you've got, 6, 10, 11 hygienists, I mean, that is a lot of, hygiene appointments that you could add a $30 fluoride to. So, we've got to think about things, more in those terms for sure.
So Zach, we got a lot into like the mindset of office manager and kind of like your path and stuff. I know you teach a course called Follow the Leader, and it's pretty popular. And maybe at some point we'll offer the course as a webinar to listeners, to a limited amount of listeners, and some of my clients or something like that, because I think it'd be really cool. Yeah. The kind of the premise of the course and kind of your philosophy and why you decided, as a 4-year office manager, you had enough. You decided, I don't have to be a 10-year office manager, a 30-year office manager, a 20-year office manager to design a course. I've done it 4 years. I know enough. I'm designing a course. Listen, I designed a case presentation course like a year after presenting live 4 or 5 times. Right? Like I presented live in 4 or 5 practices around the country in a year, and I was like, I can teach this. And I did it, which is kind of presumptuous and kind of egotistical, but it is. It's always been, how could you know? But certain people can dissect problems and solve the problem, right? So what was why did you want to design it, and when did you realize this is a need? And tell us the premise about it.
Yeah, so there's kind of a funny story behind, because I recorded this first with ADOM a couple months ago, and they needed somebody, they do what's called distinction casts, and, they're like, can you do a course for us? We're in a pinch. We really need somebody. And I was like, sure. And it was actually just me getting just back from Intellicon. So I just spoke on Morning Huddle at Intellicon. And,
we saw each other, yeah.
Yep. And I was like, all right, I've got this. I knew I was doing it. So I prepared everything. But what I didn't do is read their email of like, hey, we want a full presentation, PowerPoint, And if you haven't met me yet, I'm not a PowerPoint guy. I want to talk to you. I want you, like, if I have a PowerPoint presentation, it's a couple small bullet points, but I want you listening to me. I want you hearing what I have to say, take notes on it, but I don't want you staring at a screen and me just pointing to things like, do this, now do this, now do this. Like, I want to have that conversation with you. I want to be very intentional. And that's one of the things that's in the course. So I did not do that. And that was my intent, but I didn't realize that they wanted that. And so they at first were like, we've never done this before. And I said, if you just trust me, like, I've got this. Like, I'm very confident about what I'm talking about, and let's try something different. And I'm glad that they did, because I think it went really well and it's been really well received. But one of the biggest things is I hear all the time, and it's not only office managers, because we'll talk about doctor owners too that run their practice. And this is the question I said, do you have a hard time implementing or getting your team to follow you or complete tasks that were delegated? The answer is yes from 99% of them.
All day long, every day.
Do you feel overwhelmed and not sure where to start? Yes,
for sure.
All day long. I said, this course will give you real-time skills and tips on how to be an effective manager in your practice, resulting in your team wanting to follow your lead. And I started thinking, like, as I was leading this, I said, how does that play out? And so I started thinking, and I'm like, okay, when I think about all my bad bosses that I've had in previous jobs working at, restaurants and stuff, I'm like, they gave zero direction. They didn't really care about me. They didn't follow up on me. So I started thinking of things that I didn't have that I wanted. And these are tactics that I use when I lead my team, because I'm like, I want to be the boss that nobody's ever had, in a good way. Not the worst boss they've ever had, but the boss they always wish they had, that somebody would hear them. So the first thing I started off with is leaders give a sense of direction. And when we talk about directions, we need to be like their GPS. We're telling them where to turn, where to go, and showing where the end point is. And if we're able to do that, then they know, okay, I'm doing this and why I'm doing this and where I'm going. So that was one of the biggest parts. And then the other part about it is, we talked about scarcity mindset. We need to have the complete opposite mindset and have an abundance mindset.
Yep.
We need to be open to share. And that's another post that went into my group, and, talking about, share, learn something and share it to your team. Always share with your team. But the 4 points of what effective leadership to me personally, now anybody can come in and say, you're full of baloney, I don't believe this is what it is. But I will tell you, try it and you'll find out that it works. And it's not that I think I'm God's gift to dentistry, or I'm the best that's ever been had, but I do know what I'm talking about. I have a lot of data to back it, and I have a very large team that will come alongside and say, yes, this is exactly what he does, and it works. So there's 4 points to this, and I think they're very, very, very important points that not a lot of people really hit the mark. And I said, the first one is approach. It is how you approach your team. If you're coming hard and fast and unempathetic, they're not going to listen to you. You have to come in to where they feel like you're on their team, but also that you care. So approach is a big one. Intentionality is the second point. You have to be extremely intentional in what you do and how you do it. You can't just flippantly go through the office and just make changes and do these things. They're not going to follow you. If you're not an intentional person, they could care less. Communication, which is the other back end of that, of actually communicating with your team. But the last one that I put in there, and I think it's the most important one of all of them, because our patients hate when we don't do it. Our team hates when we don't do it. It's when we don't follow through. If we say we're going to do something, you better be darn sure that you're going to do it, because you don't hold your word. Guess what happens? There's this much trust in your team. So those are the 4 major points. And I was like, you know what? These are things like I feel that I do really well. And there's some, people ask me if there's one that you could pick out that you don't. I was like, communication's a hard one, especially with our large team. There's sometimes where I'm like, that's not that important. They don't need to know that. But that's me thinking that they don't need to know it, not the team saying, yes, actually, that would have been really helpful for me, and this is why. So I've really learned, like, I will over communicate. And I'm like, even if it's not that much of a stone that they really need to know, I'm still telling you because I want you to be in the know. But then in the final one is just follow through. Is the moment you don't follow through with something, there's already a little bit of that trust. If it's something small, it's not that big, but you already start losing trust because, like, he said he's going to do it, but he didn't. And it's like, okay, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And then before you know it, none of your team trusts you because you're not doing what you say you're going to do. So the other points really fall in with that, because intentionality plays into follow through, communication plays into follow through, your approach plays into follow through. I was on a previous podcast a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about, like, with the intentionality part of it, where you're I do check-ins, right? I check in with my associates. I check in with our team. I go every day. I'm walking through. Do you have everything you need? Can I help you with anything? But the point I made is you need to check in, not check on. Your team needs to see that you're not trying to catch them doing something wrong. You're checking in on them to make sure they have what they need. So yes, you're a presence there and they know you're always around, but you're not trying to catch them on something. So that's where that approach comes into.
It's tough, I think, sometimes as leaders not to micromanage. And I think that's something that 100%. Many leaders struggle with. You've got to be able to delegate, and you've got to, obviously audit. You can't just delegate without any follow-up. Correct. Or, things may not be done. But I think it is a fine line. And I think it's a skill set that takes time to develop, where you can be an effective leader, delegate properly, audit well without micromanaging. And then I love the term check in, not check on. I think that's some really powerful stuff there, Zach.
It's helped me. And even when you do have something like, so you mentioned auditing, right? I'll bring teams in, like, especially I have one of the girls that does payroll, and, she missed something on it. I said, hey, real quick, let me show you something. And I showed her, I said, this is what I'm looking for in this area. It was missed. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was like, no, you're fine. Like, I know it wasn't intentional. I just want you to know moving forward, this is how I want it done. Because otherwise this is what happens if it's not done that way. Yeah. And it's all about how you approach that.
Well, it's like, if you go to a staff member, like, hey, you did this wrong, your approach is already negative. Yeah. Right. Like, it's like, hey, you keep doing this wrong. It's negative. When I was coaching still, and then the military, and then here, I tend to approach things like, hey, you did this 80% to perfect. Let's find the 20% and let's improve and let's invest in you and make you perfect, or at least make you more effective than you were a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
you're right. The approach has got to be about that.
Well, and I think it's reminding them that we're on the same team too. Like, so I'll run some audits on accounts and things just to, make sure that we're not missing things, and I'll catch things sometimes, and I'll, talk to team members about it. And I do feel like sometimes people get defensive, they don't want their mistakes to be caught. They think they're in trouble, whatever it is. And, it's just kind of like, hey, like, I'm doing this as like part of the team. Like I am part of the team, as a leader of the organization. And like, we all want the same thing. We want to help prevent mistakes. We want to help make sure that, our collection rate's high and that, we're not miscommunicating things to patients. When it comes to like things with insurance, sometimes I caught, on a bigger case, it looked like we were estimating insurance was going to pay like $11,000. And I just like stepped in with the team. I was like, hey guys, like, this is great if this really happens, but like, I just don't know that this is the right way to approach this. And, we may want to consider this. And so we're trying to be proactive. We're trying to prevent problems. But, when we do this stuff, like in my mind, no one's ever in trouble, but it's like, how do you convey that to them? You're not in trouble. I'm on your team. We're working together. We're all, it's a second set of eyes, just making sure that we're going to reach our end goal, that type of a thing. So,
yeah. So it's kind of funny you said that, because, one of the biggest things I do too is if I ever do anything wrong, because I'm not perfect.
Oh yeah. No, me.
So like if I affect them, like, hey, I messed up.
Yep.
And I fixed it and I'm moving forward. Be open to admitting your mistakes. But then it's funny too, because I had another hygienist that she was in another office that you are in trouble if you mess up. Right. And so I would come in, I'm like, hey, are you good? And she's like, what did I do wrong? And I'm like, I just start laughing. She's like, why are you laughing? She's like, I messed something up. I was like, no. I said, I'm laughing because you're not in trouble. Like I'm checking in, just making sure you're okay. And you have everything that you need. She goes, oh no, I'm great. Thank you so much. She's like, if there's anything I ever do wrong, I said, listen, if there is something that I have a problem with, I'll have a conversation with you. And I preface people with this, like, if I have an issue, I'm going to talk to you. And it's going to be an easy conversation. But if I'm having to have this conversation multiple times, then yes, things do need to change, because something's not changing. But if you preface these things with your team, they'll start understanding why you're having these conversations and what your intention is with it. And I think that's super important. But then also to let them know, like, hey, I'm human. I messed this up. I fixed it though. Or, yeah, you're right. I should have done it that way. It doesn't mean that they're better than you or they're telling you what to do. You control that conversation, but be a human with them. Let them know you're real, because that's where you're going to build that trust.
That's great. Well, let's talk about when you do have to have the more difficult conversations. So, let's say that you've had the conversation 3 times now and things aren't changing. How do you approach those difficult conversations with your team members?
So the biggest thing I like to ask them is that I remind them what we've discussed, right? So if it's, whatever it may be, like, hey, you're still alternating, you're posting prophy and then perio maintenance and prophy and perio maintenance. No, you're going to post perio maintenance. Once perio, always perio.
Yep.
We're going to ask for an alternative benefit. That's how we handle it. Right. And so if it's, second, third time and we're talking about it, I say, listen, we've had this conversation. Is there some part of this that you just don't want to do what I'm asking? Or is there something you don't understand? Once I know the answer to that question, I know which direction I need to go. If they're like, well, I just don't want to do it that way. It's like, okay, well, you don't want to do what we're doing. So that's a different conversation. You're not on board with what we're doing. If it's, I still don't understand, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting. Then it's like, okay, your intention is correct. You're not understanding. So let's figure out what you're not understanding and come up with a plan how we can correct this. Divide it, figure out, make them answer and tell you which way to go.
I love that quote. I think that's great. You're just kind of getting right to the point. Like, is this a problem of you need more coaching, or is this a problem of you just don't want to get on board with how we're doing things? So I think that's fantastic.
Now, I have a question real quick. If they say, I just don't want to do it your way, how does that go?
Those are not fun conversations, but most of the time they're not a good fit for the team. Because if they're not on board with what I'm asking them to do and I'm their boss, they're not going to be on board with anything else that anybody else is asking them to do. And what in turn happens is our patients suffer. And we're here and we're working and our salaries are paid because we have our patients that trust to take care of them. It's rare that I have people that are that bold. Sometimes they're like, oh, I didn't realize how serious that was. I'm so sorry. And that's usually what most of them are. is I was lackadaisical about it. I need some more coaching on it. Let's move forward. You do have a couple people that are bold, and if they're bold enough to say, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do, it's see you later. You're not a good fit, and we're going to find somebody else that's a better fit. It's part of business. I mean, they signed up for the job, and the expectation.
If you can't change them, change them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's an unfortunate part of business, but you have to do it.
Do you think dentists have a tendency to hold on to team members that aren't a good culture fit for longer than they should?
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that at one point or another, because it's difficult, right? But then you start learning lessons of like, this is never a good situation. It's never a point where pushing this further because we think we can fix it when nothing's changing, right? It's like the definition of insanity, like doing the same thing but expecting different results. You just have to come to a point where you accept, okay, this person does not fit, but doesn't mean you don't try. I don't want you to get that mindset of like, okay, they're not doing what I want to do. See you later. Like, that's not how you do it. You take the adequate steps of, I want to train you. This is what I'm expecting. But if it's still to a point where you're like, okay, I've done X, Y, and Z, and it's still not changing, then it's like, okay, we need to have a different conversation. So you definitely still need to put your foot forward, but it's like, how long do you draw that out? A lot of people is like, okay, do I draw it out a year? Do I draw it out 2 years? Like, in my opinion, that's way too long. If it's 90 days and they're here and they're still not doing what you want them to do, that's the 90-day mark where you're like, okay, I need to get you trained on this because we've worked on it for the first 3 months. You have, another 90 days to figure it out. If not, then we're going to have to find somebody else, and just put it on their plate of just like, I like working with you if they're a great employee. It's like, but I need this to happen. If you can't make this happen, then we need to find something else. So, and that way they're aware of it to know what they're working.
Let's talk about motivation. How do you motivate your teams to hit goals or exceed goals? How do you, is this something that you're doing on a daily basis to help motivate all the team members? Or
Yeah, it comes in different ways. I think just having a good relationship with your team is a first big motivator right there, because they're having fun working with you. We spend more time with each other at the office than we do with our families.
Yeah.
So why can't we have we're professionals, we're in the dental industry, but like, why can't we have fun, right? I think having fun in the practice and learning about each other and be able to get along with each other, like that's one of your best ways to motivate your team. But then another way I like to motivate is I like to let people kind of really understand the impact we do make on these people. And I've really started using this past week after I've gotten back from the DR of like seeing like what we're able to do for people that have nothing. I'm like, but it doesn't change there. Like what we're doing here, we're doing things to restore patients' smiles, to restore their confidence. We're able to treat, on the peds side, we see a ton of kids. And I'm like, guys, what I want to encourage you with today is these parents have brought their children, which is their most important thing in their life, and allowing us to treat them and work in their mouth. It's a very vulnerable thing what we do in dentistry, right? Like you're laying on your back with your mouth open in a chair. And I taught this in my morning huddle class. It's like, that takes so much trust. And I was like, the fact that they trust you to do that on their child, you should be honored to let them allow you to do that. And that's where I really try to push. And then like, we don't go over a ton of numbers with our team here because we have a very large office, and it will kind of melt their brain and understanding, what it takes to run the office. They're only going to see the big numbers, but I do go over like new patient numbers. I think 2 months ago, we had 311 new patients, and we retained 80% of those. I think national average is 49%.
Yeah, it's not great for new patient retention. So that's incredible.
80% of our 311 new patients. And that's not including our reactivated patients too. So, you're talking like that was a massive win for the month. And I go through and I was like, guys, this is happening because of you. I said, because parents are talking to each other, patients are talking to each other. I'll bring up Google reviews and I'm like, hey, this patient just name dropped you in Google. I'm like, great job. I love to see that. And just giving them that positive reinforcement, I think, is the best way to motivate them to want to reach goals and do better. Because if they feel like they're doing a good job, they want to do it.
Let's talk about this retention of new patients. What do you think you guys are doing better significantly than the national average, than the average dental office to retain these new patients?
So I said this in a DI podcast when I first got on. I got really quiet when they asked me this question. I was like, they're either never going to ask me to come on again or they're going to love it. And they asked a question about selling in dentistry. And I told them it's the stupidest idea I've ever heard in my life. And if you're selling in dentistry, you should just stop.
Okay.
And I even get that reaction from Matt. And I said, because if you're selling on somebody, you're trying to convince them. We're not convincing people here. We're educating our patients on why they need what they need in order to get the treatment that they need. We have not told them why it's important to them to get this done. So if you're selling, you're leaving out all the major points and parts of like why it's actually important to get these done. So what we do is we actually have a ton of follow through with our doctors. We educate our patients. We tell them why it's important and what happens if they don't. We don't say, hey, like you're going to die if you don't get it. But it's like, if you don't do it, it's not going to get any better. This is the best time to get it done is now. And then we allow them to say like, hey, do you have any questions about this? What have I gone over that you're not quite understanding? And allow them to have that conversation. And it doesn't feel as aggressive of like, oh, you need four quads of scaling and root planing and you need to do this. I'm not doing anything else unless you do this and you need to do it right now. Like we don't have that pushy mindset. And that's where I feel like the selling in dentistry gets to, where it's like you're really pushing the patient down the road you want them to go rather than guiding them. Like let's guide our patient down that road and take that time. So that's where I get into where I'm saying selling in dentistry is not the right approach, because you kind of get that used car salesman feel if you're doing it that way. So I'm not saying you can't sell.
I like this conversation, although I guess in my mindset, this is kind of splitting hairs, with the semantics, but I feel like maybe what you're talking about is different sales approaches.
Correct.
What you're describing to me is still selling. You are explaining the value of the treatment to somebody. You're explaining the consequences of not moving forward with treatment. Your approach is not in that pushy, quote unquote, used car salesman type of way. So I think that's something valuable, is like how, and I love the terminology you use there. How can we guide our patients? And that's truly, that's our job at the end of the day. It's to provide guidance on the treatment that they need, different options that they have, benefits of each treatment, drawbacks of treatments, risks of treatments, things like that. So it is an education. I always tell our docs, like it is your job to show that value. And it's up to the docs, it's up to the hygienists, it's up to the assistants, up to the treatment coordinators. Like everyone on the team should be working together to show that value. But I do think it is that fine line between, coming off as overly pushy, like we need to make this sale versus, hey, I'm going to show you every reason why you should do this. And at the end of the day, it is up to you if you want to do it or not. So
absolutely. And I'll agree with you there. It is semantics when you come to it. Our forefront is the education with the patient and understanding the treatment of why it's important. It's greater than, hey, you need to make sure if you're under $2,000 in adjusted production, your hygiene column, I'm coming to talk to you. So you don't have that push of your team of like, I have to get this sold or I'm going to get a talking to. And that's where you get those negative effects of like, all they wanted to do is like, you have 9 cavities, you got to do them today. Like nobody's going to like that approach. So that's where I come into saying selling in dentistry is dumb. Yes, it is all sale. I agree with you 110%, but it really comes down to the approach. And that's where I don't see it as selling. I see it as you're educating, getting these patients to understand what they need and why they need it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's most important.
Do you think some docs and office managers in the education process get overly technical and clinical and don't
100%.
You don't like, so it's like, I think it really comes down to is like, we are all in sales, right? Like we are like in dentistry, we are. It's just a matter of how are you approaching it. If you're taking on the spirit of like sales as dirty used car salesman trying to convince you to do something, you're probably not good at sales. You have to use tricks. You're not good, right? Yeah. But if you get in the operatory and the patient feels like you're investing in them and you care and you're a compassionate caregiver, you transfer knowledge in a way that's simple for them to understand the outcome of what's desired. You're not overly technical. I think some docs get way too technical.
Yeah, absolutely. Patients don't need to know that. They don't care to know that. They want to know, is my tooth going to get fixed? Am I going to feel better about after this? And how much is it going to cost me? And is it going to hurt? Those are some of the major things that they want to know.
So staying in this sales realm here, I'm curious, does your office, do you guys have treatment coordinators that are specific to presenting treatment, or does everybody in your office present treatment?
Yeah.
Everyone in our office presents treatment.
What does the follow-up process look like for patients that don't accept treatment? How are you guys following up with them?
We use dental intelligence follow-ups. So it sends us automatic reminders on all unscheduled treatment. So it populates in a list, and then I'm able to assign it to all my front desk team members. And then if somebody's on the downtime, I can say, hey, go in and take care of all of this person's follow-ups for the day. If they don't have anything, and they can follow up on those patients.
Is it hygienist assistants presenting treatment and front desk following up? Is that kind of how that process works?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then if the hygienist has downtime, or, they had a 2-hour block and like, hey, I don't want to go home, that's when I'll put them on the follow-up on treatment. Now, we have considered with the size of our office is possibly bringing on a treatment coordinator or two to start handling, just because we are so big now, to where it would make it a bit easier to be. It's not that we're not doing a good job at it, but there's always an area where you can improve, right, and increase that. So we have considered bringing that in.
So this has been an interesting topic that we've talked to a few guests about lately, and we did an episode about treatment coordinators. So I used to do it the way that you guys do it now, in the sense that everyone is still trained, but like, whoever was in the room would just present the treatment. Eventually, as we started to grow, I kind of realized that, all of our back office team members have so many other things on their plate that, like, a lot of times I would get to the end of the appointment and they're thinking about getting the room flipped, that next patient, sterilization, whatever it is. And they're less focused on presenting the treatment plan, especially if it was a big one. The other thing that I realized, though, too, is like I like the idea of the consistency with the follow-up. So we went away from that system to a designated treatment coordinator. And so now all of my offices do have a designated treatment coordinator. My flagship now actually has 2 of them. And while anyone can present treatment, everyone's trained to present treatment, the goal is, the vast majority of the time, it is a treatment coordinator that is presenting the treatment. And then she is also the one who is doing the follow-ups, whenever patients aren't scheduling. And so it's the mindset of, if something is everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. Yep. So in my mind, I was like, treatment presentation, follow-up are too important that I don't want it to be a task shared by everybody. I want one person. And then the other cool thing is, since there's 1 or 2 treatment coordinators, we can basically track how they're doing, and they are actually tracking themselves, holding themselves accountable, because at the end of each day, they are calculating we focus more on, did they schedule something? So we're not focusing on the percentage of the dollars scheduled. It's, if they scheduled something treatment wise, they're on the left side of the sheet. If they did not, they're on the right side of the sheet. And then they're calculating their daily percentage of how many patients did you see and what percentage of them actually scheduled some kind of treatment. So it's a way for them to gauge on a daily basis how they're doing with their treatment presentation.
Yeah. But I like that. I like that a lot.
Dude, I was just thinking, as you were going on one of your last, little rants there, that I feel like this could be like a 3-hour episode. There's so much cool stuff, that we could talk about. And Zach and I had a great conversation when we met at Intellicon, and there's still things that we talked about that I want to reconnect with you on. I know we're both pretty busy here, but at some point we'll definitely have to make the time, whether you come up here, to check out the offices, or I come down to check out yours. We're actually going to be opening an implant office more in your neck of the woods. So I may have to make the trip down there, check on that at some point anyways.
Let's go, dude. Yeah. I think both trips will happen. I'll come out your way and you come out my way.
Well, we talked about filming something and me coming down to Florida.
Yeah. Yep.
So we should just,
we need to make it
I should just come to Florida and we could do like a on-site super podcast and do something cool, 3 of us, and video it, put the media out there. That's what we should do. We should get on Zach's boat and do some flats fishing and do a super podcast episode down in Florida.
Like what Zach said, just because it's dentistry doesn't mean we can't have fun, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All day long, dude.
I think that's the way to do it, right? Like, that'd be fun. Do the 3 of us in the room. Well, we have to wrap this episode up. Zach, you're obviously stand out in the management side of the world, and I can't open up my stream without seeing you in it on social media, between Dental Intel and ADOM and everyone else who attaches themselves to you because they realize how fresh and awesome your voice is in the space. And, you pretty much are the poster boy, literally, for ADOM now. Like ADOM's website, you're kind of everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on the show. There's some really good insights. I agree with Andrew. We could do 2 or 3 of these episodes and make them pretty awesome and impactful. And hearing you and Andrew talk about it from different perspectives, doc owner versus office manager, and the way you guys think about things is really awesome.
Yeah, I agree. What about his course? How do we find out more about that course again?
So the easiest way to get through it is through ADOM's Facebook page. They have a live recording of it that you can go through. If you just get on their Facebook page and click on videos, scroll about halfway down, you'll see my origin story with Faces of ADOM is in there. But then you also see the Follow the Leader course there. And it's about 40 minutes, and I strongly suggest you all getting in there. And it won't be the last time that I present on this. So definitely drop in there and take a peek at it. And if you want to know more,
this is their Facebook page, right? Not their website. Okay.
Not their
so
website.
if my office managers are not currently in this Facebook group, they should join it, right?
Absolutely.
ADOM.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And your Facebook group. So I've got to get them in both of them. Yep.
Yep. I've dropped that video in my group also. So if you can watch it through my group, you can watch it through my group. If I believe only members are allowed in the ADOM group. So if you're not an ADOM member, join. If not, and you just want to run it through my group, you can join a Dental Office Manager Success Network.
Very cool. Well, hey, I appreciate it, Zach. Thanks for all the great content you're putting out there, man. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey guys, me and Andrew don't get paid for this. We don't take sponsors. Everyone we choose because of their value. Please click like, please subscribe, please leave a review, please share this. Thank you guys. Have a great day.